Good morning, students. Welcome back to your economics class again. Today, we are going to continue the first chapter under the first unit of Indian economic development related to the development experience of Indian economy from the year 1947 to 1990. We had already covered the introduction of the chapter as well as the features of the Indian economy on the eve of independence in the first part of the video. Today, we are going to continue with the second part of the video in which the first topic that we are going to study is as follows. You can see on the board, the first topic is features of agricultural sector on the eve of independence. Now children, if we study about the first feature of the agricultural sector at the time of British rule, then it is very obvious and clear that at that time our economy was backward, as we learned from the portion of introduction of this chapter in the previous video. The very first feature that indicates the status of agricultural sector in the economy at that time period is low production and productivity, as you can see on the board. Now what do you mean by the term production? Production means the total output from the land area cultivated by the farmer. The total output which we get refers to the term production. At that time, the production was very low in the Indian economy, as well as the productivity was also very low. Now, what do you mean by the term productivity? Productivity means output per hectare of land. That means per hectare yield which we are getting by cultivating the land area from the farming activity or from the agricultural processes. So, production and productivity were both very low at that time period. They were so low that Indian economy was called backward because of the low yield, because of the low output, because of the low techniques, lack of irrigation facilities which were prevalent at that time. It made very difficult for the farmers to survive at that point of time. The yield of wheat at that time was only 660 kgs. Of rice was only 665 kgs. So it was quite low for the survival of the population of the country. The end result and impact was people in the economy could not survive and fulfill their basic needs. The second subheading. Second subheading is lack of means of irrigation facilities. That means at the time of independence, agricultural sector was totally based upon the climatic conditions and rainfall. If the rainfall was good, it resulted in high yield, which meant good output for the year. But if the rainfall was poor, it resulted in low yield, which meant poor output. Zamindars and the British government did not spend for the development of the irrigation facilities for the farmers. As a result, the farmers had to totally depend upon the rainfall and the climatic conditions for a favorable crop throughout the year. In those days, farmers did not have so much of money that they could import machines like tube wells or electricity-based tube wells from the foreign countries to fulfill their needs. Third heading of the topic, that is farming as a means of subsistence. Subsistence means for self-survival, for self-consumption. On the eve of independence, most of the farmers were carrying on the process of farming and cultivating the crops only to fulfill the needs of their families. It was only a means of survival for them at that time. the growth of the economy by selling the surplus crops in the market. Now, what was the reason that subsistence farming was prevalent at that point of time? The reason was that very little surplus was left with the farmers to be sold in the market as marketable surplus, because they had to pay huge sums of money in the form of rent to the zamindars, in which they could not save anything for themselves. Think of the topic, that is small and fragmented land holdings. At the time of independence, the portion or the piece of the land area held by the farmers with them for the process of farming or cultivating the crops was quite less. That means the proportion of the land area held by the farmers was very less in the area if we measure it for the proper cultivation of the crops. Moreover, the fields were so small that they could hardly produce huge amount of output from them, and the cost of production which used to come was very high even to till that small portion of land area. The second biggest problem was the land holdings were not at one particular place. The land holdings were fragmented. Fragmented means farmers had small proportions of land at different places, in different areas. So they had to move from one place to the other, travel to cultivate their fields. This created a lot of problem for the farmers to carry on the agricultural activities. Fifth heading, that is land revenue system under the British rule. If we talk about the land revenue system under the British rule, there was a triangular relationship between the British government, the owner of the soil, that is the zamindar, and the tiller of the soil, which is shown by the term landless farmers. There was a triangular relationship between all three of them. This relationship was termed by land revenue settlement system, or simply land revenue system or zamindari system under the British rule. At this point of time, the British government used to take a fixed amount of rent from the zamindars at a fixed period. Zamindars were free to charge as much as rent they want from the farmers in order to pay the rent on time to the British government. For these reasons, they even used to exploit the poor and the landless farmers. The farmers were the tillers of the soil. In case if they were not able to pay the fixed amount of rent in the fixed period of time, they used to lose the right of cultivation, number one. They used to lose interest, their interest, that is the share of the crop that they used to get, or the amount of money that they used to get. Moreover, they are even self-interest of doing farming. Third, they lost their employment opportunities to work as a laborer on the fields of the zamindars. So in this way, this land revenue system or zamindari system, as you can see on the board, this triangular system made zamindars the permanent owners of the soil, and the implication of this system was that the poor farmers were left out to pay huge sums of money in the form of rent to the zamindars. Failing to do so, they used to lose their employment opportunities and interest in the cultivation. Sixth heading of the topic, that is gulf between owners of the soil and tillers of the soil. At the time of independence, there was a gulf, there was a gap between the owners of the soil, who were the zamindars, and the tillers of the soil, who were the poor, small, landless farmers. Why this gulf was created between the zamindars and landless farmers is very clear from the act which was performed by them. The zamindars collected huge amount of rent from the farmers, but they did not share the cost of production with the farmers. They did not provide any irrigation facilities, seeds, fertilizers, or any other help for the farmers to grow and cultivate the crops. So the burden was totally on the shoulders of the farmers to cultivate the land area of the zamindars. Secondly, these zamindars collected a huge share of output which was produced in the farms by the farmers. They led a luxurious life by maximizing their rental income which was collected in the form of rent paid by the poor farmers. But on the other hand, if we compare the situation of the landless farmers, we have these points with us. Farmers paid a huge amount of rent to the zamindars, so they were not left with surplus amount of money in order to fulfill their needs. They were left out with very less share of output of the cultivated produce because huge share was kept with the zamindars. Third, these farmers, in the lack of output and income, starved to death and were leading a life full of problems and poverty. So there was a gulf, there was a gap which was created between these two sections of the society termed as zamindars and landless farmers. The last heading of the topic, that is commercialization of agriculture. Now what do you mean by the term commercialization of agriculture? Commercialization of agriculture is a process in which a farmer moves from the production of self-consumption towards the sale of the produced crops in the market in order to earn money. So it is a process of shift in the production for self-consumption to sale of the surplus crop produce in the market. This surplus crop produce which is sold in the market is also known as marketable surplus in economy. Now what was the reason for this? Farmers were forced to grow indigo. Indigo is a crop which was used to create a dye of blue and violet color. An advance payment was given by the zamindars and the British government to the farmers in order to grow this crop. It was a commercial crop because it was sold in the market at very high price. See, earlier the British government and zamindars did not pay a single penny to the farmers to produce the food crops. But now, because they wanted the farmers to grow this commercial crop, indigo, they started paying advance money to the farmers. This was the type of exploitation they did with our Indian farmers. Now what was the result of this? What was the result of this policy? You can see on the board that farmers had to buy food crops from the market and spend little amount of money left with them crops. As a result, they became indebted. कर्जे में फंसते चले गए. The farming became more stagnant. That is, there was no growth in the farming sector, and agricultural sector became totally backward because of these activities. It was the end of the topic, students.
Now we are going to study about the features of industrial sector on the eve of independence. The industrial sector was systematically deindustrialized under the British rule in two ways by the British government. First, the discriminatory tax policies used by the British government and very weak growth of the modern industries in India. These two techniques were used by Britishers to deindustrialize the industries. What is deindustrialization? डीइंडस्ट्रियलाइज का मतलब होता है इंडस्ट्रीज के ग्रोथ प्रोसेस को स्लो डाउन कर देना और धीरे धीरे उनको बंद होने के लेवल पर ले आना. The very first feature of the industrial sector is decay of India's handicraft industries. Before British rule, India's handicraft industries had a very worldwide reputation for its products, for the precious stones used in the handicraft items. But the British government destroyed the reputation of handicraft items all over the world by imposing double standard tax policies on the export of the handicraft items from India to the foreign countries. डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी टैक्स पॉलिसी का मतलब हो गया टैक्स फ्री एक्सपोर्ट ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल फ्रॉम इंडिया टू ब्रिटेन एंड टैक्स फ्री इंपोर्ट ऑफ ब्रिटिश गुड्स इंडस्ट्रियल गुड्स फ्रॉम ब्रिटेन टू इंडिया. यानी इंडिया से रॉ मटेरियल बाहर जाएगा तो कोई एक्सपोर्ट ड्यूटी नहीं पे होगी, ठीक है, ब्रिटेन के थ्रू इंडिया को. और अगर इंडिया फिनिश्ड गुड्स इंपोर्ट करती है ब्रिटेन से तो इंडिया को इंपोर्ट ड्यूटी नहीं पे करनी पड़ेगी. तो इन दोनों तरीके से फ़ायदा ब्रिटिशर्स का हो रहा था एंड दिस पॉलिसी वाज अडॉप्टेड ओनली बिकॉज ऑफ इट. द सेकेंड मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट फीचर इज डिसअपियरेंस ऑफ प्रिंसली कोर्ट्स, यानी राजा महाराजाओं के दरबारों का ख़त्म हो जाना. राजा महाराजा ही हमारे हैंडीक्राफ्ट आइटम्स को यूज़ करते थे ज़्यादा और उसको फॉरेन मार्केट में प्रमोट करते थे. The rulers used to gift the expensive, precious handicraft items to their friends and other rulers in the foreign countries and in this way promoted handicrafts in the international market. But with the beginning of the British rule, all this slowly came to an end and handicraft industries started decaying and ruined. The third heading is competition from machine-made products. Indian goods were not machine-made, they were handmade. But the final goods which came from Britain were machine-made, they were very cheap, their cost was very low and they gave a very tough competition to the handicraft products and handmade products in India in quality as well as features. So Indian artisans could not compete them and slowly shut down their enterprises due to lack of funds. The fourth heading is new patterns of demand. People of India started preferring the mechanical and finished goods which came from Britain to India. They were influenced by the Western lifestyle and preferred Western goods instead of Indian goods. The fifth heading is introduction of railways in India. Railways were introduced in India by the Britishers around 1850 to transport the raw materials to the seaports and mobilize the army from one place to the other. This increased the size of the market for the low-cost British goods to be sold which came from Britain. बड़ी आसानी से सी पोर्ट्स के थ्रू ब्रिटिश गुड्स इंडिया में आ जाते थे और इंडिया में सेल होते थे. पीपल स्टार्टेड गेटिंग अट्रैक्टेड टुवर्ड्स देम एंड स्लोली इट रिड्यूस द मार्केट फॉर द इंडियन हैंडमेड गुड्स विच वर costly in comparison to these goods. Now we move towards another important topic from the industrial sector on the eve of independence, that is bleak, which means notional growth of modern industry. That means बहुत कम growth modern industries की होना. There were many reasons for the slow and less growth of modern industries in India, especially capital goods industries. Only one iron and steel industry was set up in India by 1907, that too by Jamshedji Tata in Jamshedpur, which was known as TISCO, Tata Iron and Steel Company. The reasons behind this was there was no capital goods industry to produce machines and industrial goods in India. Moreover, the traditional handicraft industries and cotton and textile industries were already declining, and modern industries to produce tools and equipments or machines were not able to grow. Third, the British government did not promote the capital industries in India. It did not support anyone to invest these kind of industries in India. Britishers always wanted that Indians should depend on Britain for the capital goods, that is mechanical goods and heavy tools and equipments. Along with TISCO, which was set up in the year 1907, sugar, cement and paper industries started establishing in India, but it was very late. That was in the year 1945. Facilities like railways, power generation, means of transport and communication, all-time weather roads and seaports were developed by Britishers only for their own interest and not for the benefit of the Indians. This was just done to transport the raw materials and finished goods. That's all for today, students. Hope you must have enjoyed it. Do like, subscribe and share.